Hello there and welcome back to the planner video set of videos. I'm glad I did wait, because when I tried to bend this over, it was ruckling a little bit, and so I've managed to sort of leave it to dry a little bit longer, and now I've been able to fold this outside cover over, and my papers have now glued to this properly, so I'm pleased I waited now. Now what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do an elastic closure, and so I've cut out this pocket because, as I say, I'm using up all of my leftover bits and pieces to use up some of all my stash. So I've cut this pocket out. Now it's got flaps on the side, so that it means that it'll be dimensional. So it'll give me a little bit of space between the pocket and the back cover to be able to put things in using these flaps. And that is going to sit on this back cover here. Now what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put a closure on it around about here in the middle of the pocket. And so if I just slide that pocket out of the way, keep my pencil where it was, I know that it's going to be about here that I'm going to need my eyelet to be able to insert my elastic. So using my longer arm crocodile, and this is where these come in really handy. If I change the setting to cutting, and I'm doing a 3/16 of an inch hole, so I'm just going to poke a hole in there and then move the setting to be able to do the eyelet. Get rid of those little bits, and then I'm using a 4mm antique copper. It's my dishwasher. Let me know that it's finished. So I need one of these, and you have to be careful with these backs because you have to rub your fingers against them because they very easily stick together. Look, there was two there. It looked as though there was only one. So this big bit here is going to go on the outside. And then that little bit is going to go on there. And just slot that in there. And then push it down hard. And that pushes the two pieces together. Oh, I didn't quite get it. Hang on. Do that again. Yep, got it that time. Okay, so I'm going to thread my elastic through the hole from what will be the front through to the inside, and then I'm going to take it to one side here and back again, and then cut it off. Because when I'm pulling this over the whole of the cover, I want it so that I've got enough that I can pull that on the elastic, and that's where the elasticated bit comes into play. But I don't want it too short that it won't go around and then it starts cutting into the paper, and I don't want it too long that it's too slack to fit around the actual cover itself. So I've found that if I take it to the length of the cover and back again, that should be should be about right. So I'm going to pop this loose end now through that eyelet hole again. And then I'm going to put them two ends together, flip it back over again. And so I want it about that sort of length. Hold on to it there. Okay, so I'm reckoning about here is where my knot needs to be. So I'm just going to pull it through a bit, put my knot there. And I'm just going to do it loosely for now, because I just want to check that it's going to work out okay. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tighten that up a little. Okay. Now, because the knot is too small, it will fall through that hole. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use my glossy accents, and I'm just going to put some glue to the right hand side of the eyelet. And then I'm going to sit that knot on top of that glue. Now it'll take a little while for it to stick. So in the meantime, I'm going to get my micropore out. And you'll see me using micropore a lot. Comes in handy for all sorts of different jobs. And then I'm going to split the two ends of the elastic. And then trim off that excess micropore there. So it's now holding that knot on the glue, and with splaying the ends of the elastic it makes it a little bit flatter. So if I bring that in closer, so I've put some glue here, pulled the knot through a little so it's now sat on top of the glue. And then I've splayed each end of the elastic and then put some micropore on the top. So the micropore is holding that knot in place whilst the glue takes to the elastic. And it also just helps to prevent it moving about a lot. And then I should be able to put my pocket then on top of that. And it'll form a little bit of a bump because of the knot of the elastic itself, but because I've made it a dimensional pocket, it should help to cover that a little bit. So I'm just going to put a little dot of glue on the shorter sides so that I can fold the long side over. And that will just help to hold those flaps in place. And then just want to create a bit of space. Let me move them over there. And then I can put some glue on the flaps. So what I'm doing is I'm just running a line of glue through the centre, and then I'm just using the nozzle to spread, nozzle, not noddle, the nozzle, to spread the glue about a bit. and then I can sit my pocket on top. And apply a little bit of extra pressure where, roughly where that knot is, because it's making the paper billow. Okay, so to just test it out again. Don't want to pull on it too hard because obviously the glue's not quite set. And so that's my elastic now to keep that in place, so that works just fine. And that's all okay, so I'm all right with that. Okay, the actual front cover part itself. So these images were from one of my digital kits called The Language of Flowers, and I've mounted it onto some of this green card that I printed off, and then I've mounted it onto some black card so that it's all layered. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue that in position on the front part, and I'm going to glue it to this flap bit here. So I want it running roughly down the centre. And then to the right hand side. And I'm going to put it slightly higher rather than in the centre, because I want to put the date down here. Right, I'll just leave that for a minute to go off. Now, the numbers that I'm going to use, again, as I say, I want to use up my stash. I've got all these sheets with all the sticky labels, sticky letters on, and there's some numbers on here as well. So I'm going to use those. But what I want to do is I want to draw a line so that I know that I'm putting them on straight. I can rub that line out later. So I'm going to work backwards so that I know that I've got enough space. So I'm going to start with a 0. And I'm not going to push them down just yet because I want to make sure that I've got my spacing right. And next will be the 2. And then another 0. Now this isn't a perfect colour, so I'm actually going to draw around them afterwards with a fine black pen to just outline them. Okay, so I'm happy with that spacing, I think. So that 0 is going off at a slight angle, so let's do the same. Yeah, okay. And I'm just going to use... Oh, I'm not going to use that one. I did that the other day. And then I noticed that it was a bit dirty and it was rubbing the ink off onto the numbers. So I'm just going to burnish those numbers down a little. Make make sure that they're well in contact. And then I have some fine nibbed pens, which I got from Muji. This one is a 0.38. And so if I just draw around, the shape of each number, it would just help to define those numbers a lot clearer. Stay quiet. Tell I'm consecrating. I'm not talking. So I'll leave the last two, but you can now see the difference from just outlining it. It makes it stand out a lot more. So that's my cover now, basically finished. And then that will sit on there. Of course, I can decorate this up a lot further. I can add some flowers on there. I can add some bits of lace. But as I say, I'm going to keep mine fairly plain, just because it's purely for me. If I was doing this as a present for a friend, I would decorate this up a lot more. But because it's just for my personal use, that's enough decoration for me. But it's up to you whether you want to add more to it than that. So the next thing I'm going to talk about are the pages within the journal. So with the pages of my planner, what I've done is I've gathered together 9 sheets of papers. So I've used my tea dyed papers, and I've also used some printables that I've got, and these are from Antique Papery, and it means that when I printed them out to a page, they end up a lot smaller than my original size pieces of paper. So what I did was I went through and I got my sheet of A4 tea dyed paper and I folded it in half. I then cut it down to 8 inches tall by 5 5/8 inches wide. So I trimmed off just that little bit of excess around the size of the papers, and these will now fit comfortably inside my journal cover. And then I sorted out the order that I wanted them in. So I put a tea dyed first, then an antique papery one, which I'm going to sit in the middle, because I think it's always nice to have papers that are various sizes. And then another tea dyed, and then this bit here is a little it's the pocket that you saw me put in the cover at the back. I actually just cut the image itself out and folded it in half, and these pieces I've just slotted in because I can attach the likes of, if I just show you, some index cards to the back side of those flaps. And then what I would do is, once I've attached them by gluing them in position, I can trim down that flap down to the fold, and then they will fold over independently. So, but I can show you that once I've stitched the pages into position. So I just want to make everything where I want it to be as well. Another tea dyed paper, another one of the pockets flaps. I've included this piece of graph paper here. Now the graph paper itself actually extends beyond the book page edge, but I'm not worried again about that, because what I'll do is I'll fold that in so that that becomes a little fold out page. So there's that, another tea dyed, and then I've done another antique papery paper for the centre. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that they're all lined up nicely, and then take my cover, open it up, and then these pages are going to sit in there. Excuse me. So I need to make sure that they're sort of, you know, a little bit of a distance from the bottom and from the top, and that everything is all centralised. Make sure that's all okay in there. Okay, and then I'm going to hold them together with some binder clips. And as you can see, I'm leaving it slightly closed, slightly angled. So you either need to do it angled or flat. One of the two. Now that graph paper looks a little bit skewy-fy. Oh, that's because it's cut skewy. Ha! So I might need to trim that down afterwards. Again, just need to shift that a little. This is the fiddliest part, I always think, of putting a journal together, is when you start to add the pages. And it does take a little bit of practice to get it just right. So if you're new to this, I would always suggest starting off with just some scrap paper to make sure that you've got the art of it, the knack of it right. And even then, even with all the practice, for all the tea in China, you can guarantee that you can always mess it up. And then I've got my pokey tool. Now I'm going to do a 5-hole pamphlet stitch with this. So I'm going to plonk one in the middle. Now you can measure this out if you want. Make sure I'm coming out on that spine. Yes. That's one. And then one at the top. So as I say, you can measure this out if you want. But I'm just going to do it by eye. And make sure that you don't poke it through your fingers. Dangerous things these, you know. One at the bottom. So I've got my 2 fingers look on either side of the spine as I'm poking it through. And then one in the middle of that. About there. And one in the middle of those two. And I've got my thread already sorted. So I came across this reel of thread, don't know where from, but when you pull on it, it's really strong. It doesn't snap very easily. And I've already run this thread through some wax as well. So I'm just going to go through that middle one again. There. Okay, so through the middle. And then through the next one. If you know how to do this bit, of course, you can always fast forward through to the next bit, through the top. Back down through that second one. Snapped myself back through the middle. Now this is the hole that I can never always find. So let's just poke that through there again. There we go. Because whilst I've been working on those two, the papers have shifted just slightly. Down through the bottom one. Back through that one. Okay. And if I pull on that one just slightly, it will just pull that first stitch in. And then I'm going to feed it underneath that first stitch. If I can get it to go. Then I'm going to knot those together, and I put it through once, twice through that loop, and I'm going to do that again. Form a loop and put it through once, twice, 3 times later, and then I can snip those off. And then I can take my clips off. And I should have, ta-da, a journal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fold those back now. Otherwise they're going to get in the way when I actually close the cover up, and I can trim those down because they're not quite square. Just check that it all sits nicely. It does. Now then, I don't know whether you can see, but I've now got this white thread on a black cover, so I'm going to use my black soot distressing, and I'm just going to run it over that thread. So I'll try and show you the difference. So move that out of the way. So can you see now? You can't actually see that thread so much anymore, as well as you can those. So I will carry on doing that off camera and just ink that thread up so that it disappears somewhat and doesn't stand out like a sore thumb. So that's my cover and my pages now in place. In the next video I'll show you how I'm going to decorate up the pages. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next one.